In an unprecedented diplomatic spectacle that has sent shockwaves across the international stage, former U.S. President Donald Trump and King Charles III found themselves at the center of an awkward and deeply humiliating episode during a high-profile event in London. What was expected to be a carefully choreographed meeting of political and royal tradition instead unraveled into a scene that critics describe as a clash of personalities and protocol gone wrong. Witnesses inside Buckingham Palace recounted that the atmosphere shifted from dignified ceremony to visible discomfort as Trump, known for his brash mannerisms and defiance of established norms, appeared to openly challenge the king's carefully measured words on transatlantic relations and climate responsibility. The audience, composed of diplomats, journalists, and members of the royal household, sat stunned as tension mounted. Cameras captured brief but telling moments, Trump raising his hand to interrupt the king mid-sentence, and Charles responding with a visibly tight smile that failed to mask his unease. What followed was a media storm that not only embarrassed the two men personally but also risked straining the symbolic ties between the U.S. political establishment and the British monarchy. Political analysts immediately weighed in on the fallout, noting that Trump's confrontational tone seemed deliberately calculated to dominate the room and project strength, even at the expense of traditional diplomacy. He reportedly criticized the king's ongoing advocacy for climate change action, dismissing it as alarmist and economically destructive, a stance that drew audible gasps from attendees familiar with Charles's decades-long commitment to environmental stewardship. Observers remarked that the king, who has built much of his public identity around sustainability and conservation, appeared both rattled and irritated by Trump's remarks, particularly when the former president leaned forward and proclaimed, "The world has bigger problems than your green fantasies." British tabloids wasted no time amplifying the story, splashing bold headlines about the confrontation across front pages and framing it as a moment of humiliation for the monarchy, which traditionally avoids public confrontation at all costs. American outlets, meanwhile, portrayed Trump as both defiant and reckless, with commentators split on whether he had demonstrated strength on the world stage or crossed an unforgivable line of disrespect. Diplomatic insiders later revealed that palace officials were scrambling behind the scenes to contain the fallout. Advisors to both sides reportedly urged restraint, cautioning that the humiliation could escalate into a more serious rift if left unchecked. King Charles, maintaining his composure, continued with the event and later addressed the press with carefully chosen words that avoided any direct reference to the incident. Yet, seasoned royal correspondents noted the unusual stiffness in his tone, signaling the depth of discomfort behind palace walls. Trump, conversely, seemed to revel in the controversy, using his social media platform to boast about telling it like it is and claiming that he had spoken on behalf of millions of hard-working people ignored by elite globalists. The juxtaposition of Trump's unapologetic bravado with the king's restrained dignity became the defining narrative, fueling days of non-stop coverage. Analysts argued that the humiliation was not merely personal but symbolic, underscoring a growing divide between populist political figures who reject tradition and institutions built on centuries of protocol. As the story continued to dominate global headlines, reactions poured in from political leaders, royal watchers, and ordinary citizens alike. Critics accused Trump of deliberately humiliating an aging monarch for the sake of personal attention, while his supporters insisted he had spoken truth to power in a world increasingly constrained by elite consensus. Social media platforms amplified both sides, turning the confrontation into a viral spectacle that trended across continents. Diplomats from Europe and the Commonwealth quietly expressed concern that the episode could complicate ongoing talks on trade, defense, and environmental cooperation. Meanwhile, cultural commentators reflected on the deeper symbolism of the incident. A former president, once the most powerful elected leader in the world, openly challenging a monarch whose role is largely ceremonial yet steeped in centuries of tradition. In that collision of populist bluntness and royal restraint, the humiliation became more than a single awkward moment, it became a mirror of our polarized era, exposing the fragility of protocol in the face of political theater. Whether the episode will have lasting consequences remains to be seen, but what is certain is that the image of Trump and King Charles locked in an awkward, humiliating exchange will endure as one of the most unforgettable diplomatic shocks of recent memory. The days following the confrontation were marked by an unprecedented media frenzy, with British and American news outlets dedicating round-the-clock coverage to dissecting every second of the exchange between Trump and King Charles. Video clips of the interruption were replayed millions of times across television networks and social platforms, with commentators zooming in on body language, tone of voice, and the expressions of those seated nearby. One frame in particular, showing the king's jaw tighten as Trump leaned forward with a pointed finger, became the defining image of the controversy. Public reaction was polarized. In Britain, many citizens viewed the moment as a humiliation for the monarchy, accusing Trump of trampling on centuries of carefully preserved decorum. In America, Trump's loyal supporters lauded his defiance, insisting that he had boldly rejected royal elitism. Newspapers from Europe to Asia carried the story, with headlines ranging from "Trump humiliates King" to "A clash of worlds in Buckingham Palace." The sheer scale of coverage underscored the event's magnitude, cementing it not merely as a passing gaffe but as a watershed moment in modern diplomacy. Behind the scenes, diplomatic fallout was mounting. Palace aides, speaking anonymously to reporters, admitted that the incident had strained internal morale, with some senior advisors furious at the breach of etiquette. According to insiders, senior British officials discreetly reached out to American counterparts to gauge how the situation might be diffused, only to receive little assurance as Trump doubled down publicly. His campaign team swiftly moved to capitalize on the controversy, releasing fundraising messages that framed the former president as a fearless leader who stood his ground against royalty. This maneuver outraged critics, who accused Trump of exploiting a humiliating international episode for personal political gain. Meanwhile, King Charles faced his own challenges. Though constitutionally bound to remain above politics, he was reportedly distressed at the optics of the humiliation and concerned that it could undermine the monarchy's image of quiet dignity. Royal biographers suggested that, for Charles, the confrontation struck a particularly sensitive nerve, as it touched directly on the environmental causes he has championed for decades. As the controversy deepened, historians and commentators began drawing parallels with past moments of diplomatic awkwardness between American leaders and the British crown, though most agreed that nothing matched the scale of this humiliation. Royal watchers noted that even during turbulent times, including Ronald Reagan's casual familiarity with Queen Elizabeth II or George W. Bush's occasional protocol lapses, no American leader had so directly contradicted a monarch in public. Trump's confrontation with King Charles, therefore, was seen as a break from precedent, a dramatic escalation that reflected the broader rise of populist politics worldwide. Academics debated what the incident revealed about the shifting balance between political spectacle and ceremonial tradition. Was it a sign that institutions like the monarchy were losing their symbolic power in an age dominated by brash political figures? Or was it, as some argued, a reminder of the importance of preserving dignity and restraint in the face of performative aggression? Either way, the humiliation had transcended the moment itself, becoming a flashpoint for discussions about leadership, respect, and the erosion of international norms. In the weeks that followed, the long-term implications of the Trump-Charles confrontation began to unfold. Polls in the United Kingdom showed a noticeable dip in public confidence in the monarchy, with respondents citing the humiliation as evidence that the royal family was increasingly vulnerable on the world stage. In the United States, Trump's approval among his base climbed, buoyed by the perception that he had stood up to global elites, though moderates and independents expressed concern about his disregard for diplomatic courtesy. Internationally, the incident complicated ongoing negotiations. European Union officials were reported to have quietly adjusted their approach to U.S. discussions, wary of unpredictable behavior from Trump should he return to office. Meanwhile, Commonwealth leaders expressed discomfort, noting that the humiliation of their symbolic head of state risked weakening the monarchy's unifying role across diverse nations. By the time the media cycle began to shift toward other global developments, one fact was clear: the confrontation had left a lasting mark on both Trump's political legacy and King Charles's reign, ensuring that their names would forever be linked by one of the most shocking diplomatic humiliations in recent history.